I think we're ready for an October wrap-up. So I had a pretty good reading month in October and I'm pretty proud of it, especially compared to September. I feel like I did so much better and I feel like I liked the books that I read this month so much more than last month. So this month I read 6 books in total and I don't think any of them got below a 4-star rating. I'm really excited to talk about these books, so we're just gonna dive right on in, and the first one that I read was The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. So I picked this book for my August book of the month pick and I loved it so much. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and once again Zoraida Cordova proves to me that she is one of my all-time favorite authors. I just feel like every time I dive into a new Zoraida Cordova book, I am transported. I experience so much beautiful magic and really exciting and fun characters that I feel like I can just jump right into their shoes. But it's kind of part of this weird subgenre that I really enjoy, that has a lot of magical elements to it, that is both contemporary and historical, and it just has a lot of like enchantment and whimsy and introspection. And I don't really know how to categorize this necessarily, because saying that it's a historical fiction book is true, but it's not like the whole story. And then like a contemporary fiction, that's technically true as well, or a contemporary fantasy or historical fantasy. It's just kind of all of those genres mixed together, and these end up being kind of the stories that I really enjoy, similar to like The Starless Sea or The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. So this book is about the Montoya family, and their matriarch Orquídea Divina is very mysterious and very magical. And so when the entire Montoya family is summoned to Orquídea Divina's house, they find out that she is about to die. And because of her impending death, they kind of start to figure out all of these mysteries that had been surrounding their matriarch, and they get to know more about her past. They also end up traveling to her home country of Ecuador, and there they find out more about her family and more about the reason why she is so magical. So I really loved this book. I thought it was so beautifully written, and all of the mysteries that were uncovered piece by piece throughout the story were so intriguing and really kept me engaged within this book. And you know me, I love stories about families, so this just kind of felt like it was every single thing that I love in a story just got put together, and it really made something that I fell in love with. The next book that I read was one that I just absolutely needed. I'm so glad that I bought this when I did, and I'm so glad that I decided to read it when I did, because I needed this book. And that is Where Hope Comes From by Nikita Gill, and this is a poetry collection. So it's been quite a while since I read a poetry collection, honestly. I tend to buy them on my Kindle and I'll just like read them there. I don't tend to buy physical copies of any poetry collection. But I want to say about 2 months ago, Target started stocking a lot of really interesting and good poetry collections. So I think that was back in August. I just like could not help myself. I had to buy this. I love the cover, and I've always heard some really great things about Nikita Gill's poetry. So I bought it, and then 2 months later in October, I decided to finally pick it up, and I am so glad that I did. I do have to warn y'all though, I cried so much reading this poetry collection, like more than I have ever cried during any poetry collection reading. This book just hit me in such a deep and personal place. It feels very timely to the world that we're living in right now, how you might be feeling emotionally, and it really just feels like it knows you intimately, and I loved that about this collection. Even though it understands like the despair and sorrow and hurt that you're going through at the moment, it doesn't like pander to you, it doesn't talk down to you. It just kind of meets you where you're at and like gives you this really good feeling. And I think that the title really just sums it up, Where Hope Comes From, because it's not just trying to give you hope, it's trying to help you discover it. And I was also a little bit worried when I went into it thinking like, are these poems just going to be like that kind of Instagram, you know, graphic of like this like toxic positivity, and I was so grateful that it wasn't. And then my other fear was that all of the poems are going to sound the same, and they didn't, which I was just like blown away by the obvious talent that Nikita Gill has to create a collection on something that is a little bit vague in, you know, topic, I guess. And she didn't just write the same poem 100 times and like put it in a collection. I've read collections like that where it's literally just the same thing, just said differently, and it's so boring. But with this one, I just never felt bored while I was reading it, and it definitely helped me find a lot of like hope and strength within myself, and I really, really enjoyed it. I can definitely see myself coming back to it in the future, maybe even this month or next month. And yeah, I just highly, highly recommend this book. I thought it was amazing, and it was a really great way to jump back into poetry collections. The next book is one that I kind of just read on a whim, and I found the audiobook for it, I think on Hoopla, and I was like, whoa. How does Hoopla have this audiobook? I mean, that's kind of crazy. I ended up reading A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. So this was a really, like I said, it was just a spur of the moment read. I had no intention of reading this book this soon, but I was like, you know what? It's October. This is a Dracula retelling, and I want to read it. So many people hype up this book, and it sounds so good. And I just kind of put it on one night. I think I started it around like 7:30, 8:30, somewhere around there. And I was like, you know what, I'll just listen to it before I go to bed. You know, I'll finish it in the morning. It's not a big deal. I was listening to this audiobook, and I was like, okay, I'll stop here. This is a good place to stop. And then I would just keep listening. And then I'm like, okay, now's a good place to stop. And I would just keep listening. I devoured this book in one sitting, in one night, and I was just like blown away. It was just such an amazingly beautiful, haunting, creepy, romantic, like romantic in a very creepy way, book. I was shocked. I kind of went into it being like, I don't know if this is going to be the right book for me. I've kind of had a few misses with these kind of like hyped semi-indie books, and they don't always work out the way that I hope that they do. But this one just impressed me so much. It was wonderful. I think the thing is though, I haven't read Dracula before, so I can't really say if it's like a really good retelling or, you know, how it interacts with the original work. So sorry, but I did really enjoy it, and I think that even if you've never read Dracula, you don't know really anything about the story, it's still going to be really interesting. The next book is one that I read while I was back in New York on Long Island, and I think this is the only book that I actually read and finished while I was there. And that's because one night I ended up drinking way too much. It wasn't even way too much. I think I had about 3 drinks, but the drinks were extremely strong, and I can't hold my alcohol. I can get drunk really, really easily, and it wasn't a great night for me. So I ended up staying up quite a bit that night, and I decided to listen to an audiobook. And that audiobook is one that I have had my eye on for a while because the author is somebody that I really admire. I follow her on Twitter, I listen to her podcast, and the book is What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by Aubrey Gordon. So this is a nonfiction book, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I do think a bit of it is very like basic, kind of introducing you to what fat phobia is, how it operates within society, the things that we can do to combat fat phobia. So I highly recommend this book if maybe you're a thin person or a non-fat person and you're interested in learning more about fat phobia and how it works and, you know, its kind of effects on people, then I highly, highly recommend this book. If you are a fat person and you've already interacted with fat liberation, or you've kind of started to already unpack a lot of the internalized fat phobia, I think that this book will still be really insightful and helpful, but it might kind of feel like you've already heard a lot of this stuff before. But I feel like that's kind of the reason I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, is because A, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really, really well written, and I just really like to hear what Aubrey Gordon has to say. I think she's really smart. I think she has a lot of good insights, and I also feel like this is a really good introductory book. So if you're looking for something that is really introductory to fat phobia, I highly, highly recommend it. And if you want any supplementary things, then I highly recommend her podcast, and it's called Maintenance Phase. I love it so much. It's a lot of fun. I'm also a patron of hers, so I also get some of like the bonus episodes. Yeah, I'm a huge, huge fan of Aubrey Gordon. I think that the book is really great, her podcast is really great, and I can't wait to see what she comes out with next. The next book is one that I am so glad that I finally got a chance to read, and that is Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. So this book is like a total childhood classic. I never read it as a kid, so this was my first time reading it, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I just know that if I read this when I was a kid, this would have been my entire personality. It would have gone right up there with Ella Enchanted, Aquamarine, and Charlotte's Web. And I think the thing that I loved most about it, the thing that I could enjoy and respect the most about it now as an adult, is that the writing is exquisite. It is gorgeous, it's lush, it's sweeping, it's so beautiful. And it's just so hard to give like an accurate description of the writing style. It's just so beautiful, and it's rare that you get to read something like this. So if you don't know what Tuck Everlasting is about, it is about the main character, Winnie Foster, and her family is very overprotective of her. So she longs to break out of her shell, to break out of her home, and to experience life. And one day when she is about to run away and she's going through the woods outside of her home, she runs into this boy, and she finds him drinking from this spring, and she's like, hey, I want to drink too. This is my woods. I can have a drink of this spring. And he's like, no, not a good idea. And she is very confused about this, and then he ends up having to kind of explain to her why she shouldn't drink from the spring and how it gives them these magical qualities to where they can live forever. So she basically gets kidnapped by this Tuck family and gets taken back to their home, and they have to convince her to not tell anybody about this. There's a lot of other elements to this story as well, but I feel like if I tell you too much about it, it's gonna be a little bit of like a spoiler. So I highly recommend that you read this book if you haven't. It is just absolutely gorgeous, so brilliant, and then go watch the Disney movie after it. It's very different than the book, but I think that it still does a pretty good job of representing the book pretty well. I don't know. I feel like that's probably a contentious opinion. I feel like, you know, movie adaptations, either you love them or you hate them. I kind of always lean towards, I really like the movie adaptation. There's very few ones that I actively hate, but this one I actually really enjoyed the movie. So, and then there's also a Broadway musical, which I also really enjoy. And the very last book that I read in October was The Atlas 6 by Olive E. Blake, and I'm so glad that I have finally read this book. I brought it with me to New York, and I read, I think, about 100 pages of it while I was there, and then I just didn't finish it. So I kind of had to, you know, push through it by the end of October. But I'm really glad that I did finally finish it, and I absolutely loved it. I'll leave the link down below to the vlog where I talk about both of these books, but I don't want to go too much into detail for this one, because I'm still kind of trying to gather my thoughts about this. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I had kind of gone back and forth with whether I wanted to rate it 4 stars or 5 stars, so I kind of settled on 4.5. So on Goodreads it says 5 stars, on Storygraph it says 4.5, and I feel like that's a pretty accurate rating for me. The thing is that I really, really loved reading this book. It was so much fun. I loved all of the characters, and they were all so different and so unique. It was really hard to choose my favorite character. I think my two favorite, well, I think I have three favorites. I think Libby is definitely one of my favorites, Tristan is another one of my favorites, and then Parisa is another one. The other characters I also love, but those three are just my favorites. And I think that there's a chapter in this book that kind of cements why they're my favorites. So if you've read this book, you might know the chapter that I'm talking about. I recently watched a video, I can't remember who it was by, but it was basically a vlog and review of this book. And one of the reasons they liked it so much was that the characters felt very shippable. So like you could kind of ship any character with another character and it would just kind of work. And I think that was one of the reasons I liked this book so much as well. It's just really hard to explain what this book is about. So in this world there is magic. It's one of the things I'm not super clear on, is that does everybody know that there's magic? I think they do. I'm pretty sure that even non-magical people know that there's magic in this world. These 6 very powerful magicians, witches, I don't know what they are. I think that they're called medians in this book. So 6 of them end up getting recruited into this secret society, the Alexandrian Society, I believe. And they are the caretakers of lost knowledge from the greatest civilizations of antiquity and the foremost secret society of magical academians in the world. And, oh wait, that's one of the words I got mixed up on the first time I read this. Academicians. All 6 of these characters get taken to the society and they kind of get initiated, and a lot of stuff goes down. So yeah, I mean, I feel like if I say anything further than that, it's just going to be a huge spoiler. And I don't want to spoil this book. I really don't. I think it's such a fun read and I highly, highly recommend that you pick it up. I know everybody's been talking about it. I know it seems really overhyped, but I think that it deserves a lot of the hype that this book gets. So if you like dark academia, if that is your thing, then I highly recommend it. I don't know if I would recommend it being your first dark academia book, but it is a lot of fun and I think that the characters are really helpful for people who like aren't super into dark academia or possibly aren't really into science. I am one of those people. I do not like science. I'm really bad at it and I still managed to really enjoy this book. Alright, so those were all 6 of the books that I read. I only own 4 of them physically, but I had such an amazing reading month. I'm really proud of myself for getting through 6 books. I wasn't sure I was gonna make it, but I did. And I'm really glad that I ended up loving all 6 of those books. It feels like that doesn't really happen very often. Down below in the comments, I want to know some of the books that you read in October, which ones you loved, which ones you didn't love. And if you've read any of the books that I did, let me know your thoughts on them. And if you made it this far into the video, I think that the emoji that I want you guys to comment, the red scarf emoji, because we are getting very close to the release of Red Taylor's version. So yeah, if you made it this far, down below in the comments, leave a red scarf. Alright, so I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, Storygraph, and TikTok. All the links are going to be down below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!